So good morning, everyone.
Well,
Today is November 17th, and I am substituting for Geshe Darge, who is out sharing his wonderful presence somewhere in the universe, teaching the Dharma, or um, so I'm here in his place, and I will be giving a continuation of a talk that I gave not last Sunday, but the previous Sunday, where we were focusing on the ethics of restraint or the practice of morality, and how that is so important as we are better able to understand our emotions, and in particular in generating the skill and the determination to be able to overcome and manage our anger. So that's what we'll be doing today, sort of a continuation of this topic, particularly about the disadvantages of anger. So before we start, then let's just take a minute to generate our intention for coming together today. Thinking that the best possible use of our precious human rebirth is to be able to free ourselves from cyclic existence, from all the different types of unhappiness, all the infinite forms of suffering that are part and parcel of being born in samsara. And that we have the choice and the responsibility to be able to find the exit door to get out of suffering, and that this is something that we do on a daily basis, even on a moment-by-moment basis. This is a choice we make so that we open the doorway and we can be free. And that we're not just freeing ourselves, but instead, with courageous determination, based on compassion and reasoning, and we resolve to free all sentient beings, all living beings, so that they too can find their highest potential, which is to attain the state of Buddhahood, the state of enlightenment. So in a nutshell, our intention is to become happier and free from suffering, to be good people, be kind to others. Okay, so I wanted to actually start out a little bit in the weeds here. So, we're doing a little bit of the geeky stuff to start out with, because in the last class, we did talk a lot about, anger, disadvantages of anger, and how having, an unhappy mind, a restless, disenchanted mind, that kind of mind that's out of equilibrium, right? Then that becomes the source for anger, right? And we talked about how anger destroys the happiness of this life and puts us on the express escalator down to the lower realms, right? All those disadvantages. So let's take a closer look, though, at where that comes from. How do we understand this from the perspective of the mind and mental factors? And again, this is something that you may have studied in the past. I think Geshe Darge has given classes on this in the past, but it's a complex topic, and it's something that I find I have to go back to over and over again. So I hope it'll be. I'm not going into any depths here, but just a quick reminder, perhaps. So two concepts here: the idea of the mind and its associated mental factors. So the mind then is the definition of the mind is the part of living beings. What functions does it perform? What functions does the mind perform? Well, it's what cognizes, right? What experiences, what thinks, feels, and so on, right? It's all those activities that are functions performed by the mind. And associated with this idea of a main mind or primary consciousness, then are all of these. So the mind as a whole gives kind of a general understanding of objects and phenomena, right? So it gives you kind of the global big picture view, but then it's through these mental factors, and we'll go into detail, in a minute. But it's through these mental factors. These are aspects of mind, aspects of consciousness that go hand in hand with, that accompany every moment of mind, and that fills out kind of the details of the picture, so to speak, right? So they fill out the particularities of a cognition. They apprehend certain attributes of an object, or they help us understand, a specific function that an object might perform. Okay, and so the mental factors include factors that cause us to focus on a particular object, and then I'm really generalizing this. Focus on a particular object, hold that object, in mind, like with mindfulness and attention, and then there are sets of what are known as virtuous mental factors, and then the non-virtuous mental factors. So there's a total of 51 of these mental factors that enable us to apprehend objects, right? To understand our environment, to relate to it's actually the essence of our experience. Okay, so the reason I'm bringing this up is because within those, mental factors, there are what's known as the 6 root afflictions, right? And those root afflictions, and they would include, attachment, hatred, arrogance, ignorance, deluded doubt, and wrong views. All right. So because, we have these 6 root mental afflictions in our minds, since beginningless time, then that's what causes our minds to tend to be unpeaceful, unsettled, right? And so when you think of, the Four Noble Truths, then this is, the origin of suffering is the fact that we are subject to these 6 root afflictions. Okay, and so you'll notice that we've been talking about anger or hatred, right? So that was number 2 on the list. It was attachment, hatred, arrogance, ignorance, deluded doubt, and wrong views. So how do we, define hatred? So hatred is defined as animosity towards sentient beings. Animosity is a harshness of mind towards sentient beings. And if you're overcome by it, it will cause you to consider engaging in such wrongful conduct as killing or binding sentient beings. Okay. So it's a discontented, tormented state of mind. It's a state of mental distress. And when our minds are unhappy and stressed out, right, then likewise, our bodies tend to suffer as well. Okay. So that's the definition of hatred. It's animosity towards sentient beings. Um, and then I wanted to share another quote here. This is from a wonderful book. This is volume 3 in the series, The Library of Wisdom and Compassion, written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron. Volume 3 is Samsara, Nirvana, and Buddha Nature. There's the title. Everybody who's online, everybody who's not online, here you go. And so there's a chapter in here on this is a really good volume. Well, they're all good volumes, but page 69 says 6 root afflictions. So here, they use the word. So there's a little bit of a translation thing here. Sometimes we see the word hatred, as in the quote that I just read. Other times the word anger is used. So in this case, it's going to say anger, but it's still referring to the 6 root afflictions. So anger is a mental factor that referring to one of 3 objects agitates the mind by being unable to bear or through wanting to harm the object or person. So the 3 objects can be expanded to 9. He harmed me so the first 3 are, he harmed me in the past. He's harming me now. He will harm me in the future. Okay, so the 3 times, right? Past, present, future. And then 4 to 6 is, she harmed my dear friend or relative, is harming them, or will harm them. Okay, so the first was me. The second is a dear friend or relative. And then 7 to 9 is the enemy, my enemies. He helped my enemies. He's helping them now, or will help them in the future. So here, enemy is anybody that we don't like or disagree with. So anybody who interferes with our happiness. So just to recap that, this is really interesting because usually it's not just described in such detail. So the 3 objects would be the 3 times, past, present, and future. And then the 3 objects then are, myself, a dear friend or relative. So, somebody who I would consider mine, my friend, my relative, right? And the third is my enemies. So those are the 9 aspects of anger. And what's interesting is if you're studying Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, there are examples for every one of those 3 objects. It's beautifully written. I didn't have time to go back to find specific quotes, but for each of those, he'll go through and he'll say, now my enemy has received a big gift, a big donation that should have come to me, right? And that's a source of anger. It gets me really mad, right? So for all of those, you can meditate it on, use that as a verse that would cause you to say, oh, that's something that I need to be, careful of. I don't want to fall into that trap of getting angry over such a, for a ridiculous reason, right? Okay. And then, so in addition to the 6 root afflictions, then there are also 20 secondary afflictions. And the secondary afflictions also include anger. So it's almost like it appears twice. So that's why this, I think the wording is a little tricky, but when we talked about the 6 root mental afflictions, I used the word hatred, right? And then when you get down to but His Holiness Dalai Lama, they use anger there. But when you get down to the 20 secondary afflictions, there's also anger. Okay, so there's a slight difference. So I found this difference in it's Stramati's commentary on Vasubandhu's summary of the 5 heaps. So he says that anger is a form of hatred. Anger occurs only towards an object that is a source of harm in the present moment. So that was kind of interesting, right? So that's a little bit of a difference. So as a secondary affliction, here he's saying that anger is only a source of harm in the present moment, and its object can be a sentient being or something that is inanimate. Okay, so this definition is a little bit different from what I just read. Its action is to give support to such conduct as inflicting punishment and the like. Okay. And then when you think of anger, then what are some of the afflictions that are associated or derived from anger? We can think of things like wrath. We think that wrath and anger are pretty close, right? Wrath, resentment, that's different. Spite, jealousy, and cruelty. So I think that's helpful too. And each of these are defined and explained, in greater detail. That's from Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge. So which is to say that, this is a big topic, and we're only, scratching the surface here. But it's something that, if we really, really want to roll up our sleeves and understand ourselves better, and to be better able to patrol our minds on a more subtle basis, then familiarizing ourselves with these emotions and being able to catch them as they rise is very, very, very important. So, and then another point that I wanted to make that I thought was really interesting is that sometimes, when we talk about emotions, negative emotions, perhaps in particular, such as anger, then the language that we use almost makes it seem as though it almost personifies the emotion, right? It almost makes it seem as though the anger has, takes on a life of its own, takes on a mind of its own, right? And so, we say things like, the anger robs us of our happiness. Anger steals away our joy, right? Anger destroys our virtuous stock of karma, things like that, right? So you almost think that anger is like this monster out there. But so I think, we have to remember that, again, this is an emotion, right? This is a tendency. It doesn't have, a mind of its own per se, right? And so we need to be, I think, a little careful as we read, some of these texts, so that we don't come up with that, false impression. Because I think it almost tends to make the anger feel like it's apart from us somehow, that it's out there. Whereas, the anger, of course, is very much in here. Right? We call it an inner enemy, right? And even that, when it's an inner enemy, you're like, oh, it's an enemy. Well, does it have, a funny head? Does it have a weird appearance? But no, it's part of us. And so it's our responsibility and within our own ability to be able to work with that aspect of, of essentially of our minds. okay? So there's no, battle between like good and evil forces, right, and within us. Um, so I actually found a quote. I was kind of thinking about all of that, and then I was like, aha, I found this quote that just completely pulls this all together and explains it, makes the point much more clearly than I can. And so it's here on page 64. This is my little aha moment. Really, everything that you ever wanted to know about Buddhism and making life wonderful is in the series, The Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And they actually just released I think it's volume 10. The last book in the series is now out. It's about Vajrayana, about Tantra, the last book in the series. Oh. Yeah. It'll be out, I think, in December or something. Okay, so what we need to remember, though, is that like all other phenomena, mental defilements, right, all the afflictions, not just anger, are empty of inherent existence, okay? They're transient like bubbles that quickly burst. They have no existence like the trunk of a plantain tree. Rather than think of anger or any other affliction as a solid emotion that is always lurking under the surface of your mind, ready to explode and spewing its vitriol, recognize that it exists by being merely designated in dependence on some moments of mind that share some common characteristics. We designate anger. That's all anger is. It's not a monster that is an inherent part of us. It is not who we are. Okay, it doesn't define us. We need to view our afflictions from two perspectives. Okay, on the one hand, they're the source of our misery. On the other, they lack essence and can be completely eradicated from our mind streams. Okay. So that's a really, really important point. Does that make any sense? Does that seem like it? Just like, okay, I got that. All right, good. So verse 24 from Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life says, never thinking, now I will be angry, people are impulsively caught up in anger. Irritation likewise comes, though never plans to be experienced. So I think the point here is that, we are subject to these temporary states of mind, these temporary mental states, whether they're positive or negative, but they tend to arise due to a coming together of causes and conditions. We don't plan on, feeling one way or another most of the time, right? Certainly in the case of afflictive emotions such as, jealousy or greed or anger, right? It's an impulsive tendency that appears when circumstances are such that they're triggered, okay? And then when they do arise, then they cause us to harm ourselves and to harm others. And so it can become a conditioned response, right? It can become a habit to uh, uh, give in to the demands of anger. Right? So, to give a funny example, I was taking a dog training course by Iris Bloom, Iris Bloom, and it was called something like Zen and managing or helping reactive and anxious dogs overcome their anxiety. And so she gives this example. She was talking about habits, and it seemed quite appropriate here. So she was talking about like she enjoys popcorn, and so she was talking about how sometimes when she was relaxing, you know, at the end of a busy day, she'd get this big bag of buttery popcorn and she's plopped down in front of the TV set, and she'd get so excited about, you know, eating the popcorn, and she would just sit there and enjoy the delicious popcorn. And then it became, you know, a habit. So like every night at the end of her busy day, she'd sit down and enjoy this big bag of buttery popcorn. And so she, you know, she would just grab that popcorn and bring it towards her and savor it, right? But then after a while, you know, she noticed that even if the popcorn was a couple of days old, you know, it was kind of stale, she would still, out of habit, grab the popcorn, sit down in front of the TV, eat the popcorn, even though she didn't experience the pleasure of eating the popcorn anymore because it was stale and the flavor had changed, right? That action, you know, that habit was so conditioned that she would just do it, you know, regardless of the consequence, so to speak. Okay. So, you know, likewise, if we're in the habit of getting annoyed or making snide remarks, you know, yelling maybe even at somebody, out of that same type of, you know, conditioned response, right? Even though we might engage in that behavior, even though it's not rewarding anymore. You know, it's just something that you do instinctively, even though you don't really care that much. You just bark. This is dog training. You just bark, 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 yell, yell, yell. You know, even though maybe the emotional, you know, heat, you know, has gone away. So again, you know, the point is just to, you know, watch our behavior, watch our minds, and to see to what extent, you know, we're acting just out of habit. Right? So then the question, you know, arises like, what is the origin then of these, in particular, these negative emotions? What's causing us to um, have these emotions and more importantly, to act out on these tendencies? And then it always comes back to the root affliction, which is, what's the root affliction?
Ignorance.
Thank you. Ignorance, right? And so then we say, okay, well, who is the I, who is the self that is overcome by anger or who possesses these negative impulses? Right? So it always comes back to understanding, you know, who we are. And so we know that we exist, you know, as like a conventional self. You know, we definitely have bodies and minds that are then labeled as the person, me, myself, I. And so we're subject to these negative and positive emotions, right? But it's the ignorance that causes us to believe that we exist as, you know, independent, as an unchanging, so to speak, I, self, like a permanent self, that exists apart from our five aggregates, right? Apart from this collection of body and mind. So that's something that, we always have to come back to over and over again, right? How does this mistaken view of an independently existing I, how does that come together with how does that come together with acting out on these negative impulses, right? It's because we think of ourselves as being these, independent beings that exist divorced from causes and conditions, right? That is the center of the universe, right? You throw in a little self-cherishing there, right? And then, before you know it, you're this prickly monster, a very sensitive monster. And we act out in ways that defend ourselves and block out, everybody else. Okay. Any questions or comments so far?
Clarify a little bit more. I don't know if you remember the class before. We were talking about anger and the positive aspects of anger, as if a driving force.
Oh yeah, one of the
Remember
attendees may have brought
Is
that up.
that
Yeah.
I was, I'm still not very clear. I think I understand, but would you is related to this topic that you're talking about?
I think that in the previous class, and maybe the attendee, no, I don't see her here. One of the attendees had
Barbara was her name.
Barbara?
Yes.
Okay, Barbara's not here. Made the point that anger could sometimes be constructive,
Yes.
right? In the sense that we could use the force of that emotion to drive, I think, change. I think positive change was what she was saying.
Yeah.
And that, if you
Right.
didn't feel some need to change, or you could take advantage of that if you use it carefully. And I may be distorting what she said, but that you could use that as a push for social change or personal change. But I think the caveat on that is that, we need to be really, really careful as to the purity of the intention, right? And not to, just get angry. Anger implies that there's a sense of disregard for, the needs of somebody else, or the welfare of somebody else. It implies that there's, I think, a barrier between my needs and somebody else's needs. I think it implies that, I'm pushing for, let's say I'm protesting against a war, and I'm fired up about that, I guess social justice, right? It can be fueled by, or could be, fueled by a sense of anger. I'm angry that, the opponent is harming, the people that I favor. Okay. But, again, it's a little tricky because you want to make sure that you're not putting your views, you're favoring your views, versus the other person's views. And does that help? I don't know.
We also talk about it could be something related with translation, like you mentioned earlier, that hatred and anger are different things, in the meaning that anger could be constructive, hatred can never be constructive.
Okay. Yeah, maybe there's a translation.
Do you think it's a translation between anger and aversion? They say aversion sometimes instead
That's
of
true,
anger.
yeah.
And I think aversion can be part of hatred and anger. I mean, I like it when I read it in books, when it says instead of, anger or hatred, is it like, ignorance, aversion, and attachment? Because to me, that makes
That's
more
not
sense,
true,
because you
yeah.
can put aversion in either of those, and it kind of fits.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
I don't know what the real translation is. You're never sure sometimes, because you see it translated so many ways, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, version is good.
Aversion's good. But anger is just again, English, right? It's just it's got so many connotations, so many layers of meaning. You think anger, like, wow.
It's a strong word.
Yeah, it's a very strong word. Yeah, aversion is almost more, more technical, clinical or something. That's good. Yeah,
Thank you
so
very much.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a tricky one.
I think outrage is also
Oh, there you go,
applicable
outrage.
to the people misconstrue outrage for anger. Because like Lee said, aversion is strong in anger. I don't want. Outrage is partially compassionate. It is partially aversion, but there's a little tinge of I want to help the people that are being affected
Yeah,
by this,
exactly.
just
Yeah,
a touch
welfare
of
of others.
it,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
social
when-
justice.
the social justice thing, I think the anger turns to compassion if you're really going to think of it that way. You don't act out of anger. The initial feeling may be anger, but if you don't transition that to
Yeah.
something else, it will not be constructive.
Exactly,
It can't.
exactly.
You
It's
have
well
to
said.
use that feeling to understand what you're angry about, and then how can we do this without hurting?
Where's the reasoning?
You have to
Yeah.
morph it into something that's not anger before I think it can be actually helpful. You can't just be like, I'm here to help you because I hate you.
Right, and then you're throwing bombs and yeah. No, and so one of the disadvantages of anger is that it blinds us, it robs us. Here I am personifying it again when I just said you got to be careful, but whatever. It robs us of our judgment and our ability to reason constructively. So yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, you have to be able to just.
It's almost is a chemical reaction in your body.
Physiological,
It
yeah,
just takes over. It's like fear, you know?
Right, closely related, close cousins, yeah. Fear, yeah. Yeah. Complex. Yep. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about the antidotes to anger. So now we're kind of transitioning to so we're angry people. How do we get rid of the anger? So this is sort of like the skills part of the class. This is Dharma in daily life, right? None of this am I very good at, but anyway. Okay, so the main antidote to anger starts with a P, ends with an E.
The
Patience.
antidote to anger.
Yeah.
Patience.
Patience.
Is it patience?
Forbearing.
Forbearing, fortitude. It's the ability to withstand hardship. Actually, for practicing the Dharma, but that means, being careful for being caring and loving people, right? For all beings. So the main antidotes to anger are just the meditating on the benefits of patience and the disadvantages of anger.
And a distinction that I just recently read that I found very interesting was that patience is not being angry and not acting on it. It's not sitting there and being like,
yes.
oh, this is horrible, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be patient. That's not patience.
Right.
That's still anger. But the actual eradication of the arising of the feeling of anger to begin with is the patience that they're talking about.
Right.
Not restraint. Restraint is not patience.
It's good. It's better than blowing your stack,
yes.
but
it's
you're
not
right.
What they're talking about the antidote.
Yeah. If you're just gritting your teeth going, I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to get angry. It's a start though. And so why is this important? So we have to be able to connect with others, to imagine the potential impact that we may have on others. So we have to have that connection with other people, that sensitivity towards others. And it's based on that relationship, that dialogue with others. Because if we don't have that, and here's a quote, we will have no means to discriminate between right and wrong, right? So our sense of morality just goes out the window without that connection. We'll not be able to understand what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in a given situation. We will not really understand what it means to harm and not to harm others. Right? It follows, therefore, that if we could enhance the capacity, that is our sensitivity towards others' suffering, the more we do so, then the less we could tolerate seeing others' pain, and the more we would be concerned to ensure that no action of ours caused harm to others. Okay.
And you I have a question. Can I?
Uh-huh.
Going back to what you said, anger and can never be. What did you just say, Erica?
Cannot be constructive.
Yes, but anger can also be the difference in between one and another is that hatred is, even if you say, oh, I'm not gonna do anything, and I'm grinding my teeth, I'm not gonna do anything, but it's still, you mentioned this earlier, the difference between thinking and acting. I am thinking, but I'm not acting. At least I'm not harming anybody.
Right.
Would that be better than not doing anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because
That's
I'm
the
harming
first step.
myself only,
But that's not,
It's a start.
yeah, it's just not only, I mean, harming yourself is significant.
It is, yeah.
It's not to be,
And even
diminish.
if you're just thinking it, it's destroying your capacity to, collect merit, a lot of things. Like, even if it's just up
Yeah.
here, nobody else knows but you.
Yeah,
Well,
it's uncomfortable.
I think a lot of people are feel very powerless and don't do anything positive until they get angry. So, you know what I mean? So it's like that kind of drives them. It's not a good, anger is not a good thing, but sometimes it's like better than what the alternatives sometimes, unless it's gone too far. But yeah, some people, they don't get that energy
Yeah,
to make a change until the anger comes.
yeah.
And then hopefully, then all bets are off, I guess, but.
Or maybe at that point, now, like you were saying, Flavio, maybe at that point, it's still, since you can still act on it in a constructive way, let's say, maybe that is the mental unhappiness. It's that spark, but it's not the full-blown anger. I think that's what it is. It does come down to this idea of mental unhappiness, which I had a quote on that. It's in Tibetan, it's Yimi Dewa. It's that unhappy, unbalanced. Wait, let me find this because it was in the last class. Wait, give me 1 second. This is from Shantideva, verse 7, chapter 6 on patience. Finding the nourishment of mental unhappiness, which arises from the undesired and from obstructions to the desired, right? Like getting what you don't want and not getting what you do want, okay? Hatred grows stronger and destroys self. So that's it. Mental unhappiness is an unstable state of mind. It arises when something or someone harms us or harms our belongings. So mental unhappiness nourishes anger. So similarly, when our mind is unhappy, anger increases in strength and destroys the happiness of this and future lives. I think that's it. If we're not unhappy, we don't become angry. This is from Kenshin Rinpoche's comment on that verse.
I think I read something like, just listening to like lectures and stuff, is that, about the difference between the essential nature of something like anger and then the manifest nature of it. Like, the manifest anger is like that thing that can destroy merit, but at the end of the essential natures is just kind of, a movement of phenomena in the mind. It's luminosity. It's like, it's just a quality kind of like, you know, the waves on top of the ocean. Kind of like, and they don't have to disturb the ocean. This doesn't mean you can act on it in the moment, but in a way to meditate on it, on the different levels of like, you know, the different levels of the mind on how it sees it, you know, as sentient beings, it's like the manifest nature, but it's like on a deeper level of consciousness, it's just luminosity. And on a deepest level, you know, ultimate reality, it's not even there from its own side, but it's like, I guess it's like kind of like learning how to transform it, like even before it gets to anger.
Mhm.
Like just recognizing it when
Right.
any type of change starts to arise, just have your guard up, you know,
Right.
before it's even anger. Like
Right,
now it's just like the waves are starting to move for anything.
right, right. Good point. Good point. I like that. It's a different perspective, but
Yeah. It's,
getting to the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. Uh-huh. Okay, so just going back to this point, this was a quote from Dalai Lama's wonderful book, Ethics for the New Millennium, which I guess Darge taught on a while back. So having that connection with others, having that empathy for others, based on our compassion and compassionate concern for others, that gives us, you know, the reason for caring about how we engage with them, right? If we didn't care about them, then we get angry all the time and we'd be like, yeah, whatever, right? But because we do care about them, and then we want to practice the ethics of restraint. And that's why we're here, trying to learn about how to control our anger, right? So by applying reason, we can increase feelings such as empathy and concern for others until it gives rise to genuine compassion. And in addition to that, then on the other side, so that's one side, one hand, and on the other hand, then we're actively learning how to restrain and uproot and stop, eradicate our negative feelings. Okay. And so one of the techniques for being able to develop that connection with others is to understand that they also are controlled by negative, powerful negative emotions, such as anger, attachment, and ignorance, right? That's the commonality. If my mind is under the control of the 6 root mental afflictions, and I'm having trouble, you know, coping with that stress, with that burden, with that suffering, then guess what? You know, so we're all the other living beings. And so we're all in this together and we can all help each other overcome these tendencies. All right. So now we're going to talk about the benefits of patience, patience being the antidote to anger. So the word for patience in Tibetan is sipa, which apparently also is difficult to translate into English. But it's the resolution to withstand hardship in carrying out Dharma activities, which means protecting our concern for others, whatever their behavior toward us. And how do we do that? Well, one technique is to discriminate, and we've talked about this previously, but to discriminate between the agents, you know, somebody who has done something to us, and the action, you know, what the person did to us. And so we have compassion for the actor, and we just reserve judgment about the act itself. Because often these are complex situations, we're just not going to go there. But the important part is to have compassion for the person and not to confuse the action and the agent, right?
right, like designating them based on their behavior, like saying the behavior is the person. Like,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
we said it's funny because it's something that I was just studying, like that I was just looking up like the difference, you know, how you designate yourself and other beings. It's, you know, part of like emptiness too, but it's like, you know, is the person the same? Is there a person in that behavior? Is an action a person? Like, no. Is harm to you a person? No, like no part of it is the actual being.
Right, right. So to pick an example that's too extreme, but that's the only thing I can think of right now, would be like somebody. Oh, let's use an easier example. A dog that bites somebody. A dog that, yeah, because that's a little less judgmental. So a dog that bites somebody is not, then becomes labeled as a biter, right? And that label, if it's in the kennel shelter situation, can mean that the dog is, you know, very, very difficult or definitely not adoptable, right? And yet, you know, if we separate, you know, the dog from the action of biting and understand all the conditions that came into play that caused the dog to act in that way, then we would see that it's not just the dog is not like permanently a biter, right? In other circumstances, and the dog would not have, you know, been provoked to attack and bite, right? And so there's no inherent, you know, bitiness in the dog, right? Okay. So anyway, patience enables us to remain calm and open to others. And this makes everybody around us also feel, you know, peaceful. And it enables us to then build that and maintain that connection with others. And it's through that connection with others that we feel both mentally happy as well as, you know, physically happy, right? So it contributes to our physical and mental well-being. So then another way in which patience can be understood as our best defense against anger is that since anger is an unhappy, unsettled state of mind, then it causes us to lose our inner peace and our stock of merit. That's a repetition of what, you know, we've been talking about. And so we can think of everyone who harms us, who attacks us, who robs us, as being our best teachers, right? And so I know Geshe Darge has talked about that through the mind training teachings. And why is that? Why is that? You know, it seems counterintuitive, but we need somebody to, and situations to allow us to practice what we've been studying and meditating on. We need to be able to take this out into the real world, take it out into the wild, and actually do it, right? Because it's easy to read many, many, many books about the benefits of patience. But then when a situation arises, you know, when somebody's there harming you, without that, you know, real life practice, all that book knowledge, you know, kind of goes out the window, right?
I think you're a
It's
lot
just kind
farther
of
along
useless.
than you are.
What's
I
that?
think you're a lot farther along in that patience
Right.
practice than you are.
It can be very humbling. Yeah. So instead of, you know, being angry, then we should feel grateful to somebody who is causing us harm. So an example is if somebody yells at us, right? Should we be angry at the person's words? Should we be angry at the person? Or should we be angry at the negative tendency of mind, that negative habit that drives the person to yell, right? That habit. who should we actually direct our anger at? Well, in a sense, it's the words themselves that cause the immediate pain, right? That criticism, that harsh criticism, that really stings us. Somebody says, "Oh, you didn't do a good job," or "You're not capable." Even worse, "You're not capable of doing a good job," right? That hurts, right? It hurts in here, right? Or is it the person's, so should I be angry at the words themselves? Well, that sounds weird, right? Why would you just be angry at the person's words? The words are just, okay. Next would be, should be angry at that negative impulse, that negative tendency of mine. Like you could say, well, if that person, if he'd had his act together, if he'd been meditating, if he'd been studying the benefits of patience, he wouldn't have yelled at me, right? If he'd have been more calm, then this would never have happened. And that might seem funny, but people have said in Dharma class, they say, I'm coming to Dharma class every Sunday and I'm reading books and I'm doing my best to meditate every day. The real problem is that everybody else in my household, they're not interested in Dharma. They're not making any effort. How do I get them to come to Dharma class with me? And you're like, well, that would be nice, but okay, so should I be angry at those negative impulses? Should I be angry at the words? Or should I be angry at the person, right? The person should bear responsibility for his thoughts and for his actions. Okay. And so we tend to focus, all our attention on the person, right? We're angry at the person because the person, for one thing, is right there in front of us. It's more, well, I mean, we heard the words too. We can't really see the negative impulse, but the person is there. We can, there's a full sensory experience is what I'm trying to think, right? And so we focus on the person, but what we need to remind ourselves, though, is that, even the person is not inherently evil, and the person's not inherently bad, right? And so people are not, essentially bad. They're not in the nature of being bad. They're not in the nature of being good. They're not in the nature of being bad the way, it's in the nature of fire to burn, right? Or it's in the nature of water to be wet. And so, we can just use that as a reminder that, this person who is harming us now is not inherently evil. And that when circumstances change, right, then that person can become, our best friend. So that's one way of reasoning through and applying patience. That's the kind of logic that you would use as a means of identifying anger as it arises in us and then extinguishing it before we act. So so now we've talked about why we shouldn't be angry. But, all of that sounds good. But so what are the main obstacles to, even though we know why, and we have some sense of, how to mitigate it or eradicate it, why is it so hard? Why is it just so difficult to do this, right? And so I had a couple of quick thoughts here. Why is it so difficult to stop afflictive emotions, such as, in particular, anger? But does anybody want to guess? Not guess, but share something before I go to my thoughts here.
Maybe we forget like our Buddha nature and everybody else's Buddha nature.
Okay. Right, so that idea that people are not inherently, that that people are subject to these temporary afflictions, but that once they're cleared away, then our true Buddha nature will manifest.
Yeah, something like that.
That's a good one.
I like that. I found good success with that one. I think that one really works.
Got an upvote.
That Lee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey Lee.
Hey, Louisa.
I just met him at the cleanup.
Oh, good. Those cleanups are fantastic for building community.
Habituation is another big one, right? Habituation.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you're not going to follow the whole Buddhist cosmology, we've at least got habituation since birth. And if you want to follow it, we have it since endless births. That's a lot of habituation. And then for most of us in the West who don't hear about this philosophy until later in life or midway through life, it's habituation without any reservation at all. It's like it's beyond habituation. It's reinforcement of the habituation by thinking it works. It's like thinking it's the mechanism that we all have to navigate by.
Right.
And so not only are we just habituated by doing it, but we're habituated by thinking it works.
Right.
And
Society supporting that.
yeah, and so it's so hard.
Well, it did work for how many years?
It didn't work.
Millions.
It didn't work for me.
I mean, it's like a survival instinct,
Yeah.
but you just take it to everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
You assume it's what happens or what. Also,
Seems
people
normal.
don't consider
Normalized.
like thoughts as transient the way contact is. So in the 5 aggregates, one thing that totally blew my mind regarding Buddhism was the perception that thoughts are just like a breeze on the skin. Like you don't control it. It comes kind of out of nowhere. It's already bubbling around because of causes and conditions and all other things and our biology and things that happen. But then when it touches us, when we're aware of it, then we feel its effect. And that sameness of thought and physical contact was so foreign to me for
That's
so
interesting,
long that I really thought that like thoughts were controllable and contact wasn't. So you're going to see what's in front of you, whether you want to or not. Someone, close your eyes, blindfolded, someone takes you somewhere, takes the blindfold off, there's a tree. You see the tree, you can't see an ocean where there's a forest, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But I always was under the impression, and I think many people are, that thought is not that. Thought is like very intentional and I can control my thoughts. And even when I can't, there's a reason I'm having it. And not seeing it as kind of an arising and a falling away. And we get caught up in the arising and we don't let it fall away.
Yeah.
Grasp it and
Yeah.
think it's real. And we stay with it. But if we don't, it goes away just like the breeze always calms down. You have cold breeze, it's gonna stop. It doesn't blow cold forever. And
I think that the thought is the mind, like that
Right.
thinking is the actual nature of the mind
Right.
instead of just like, appearances to awareness.
100%. Yeah, that was a big part of it.
That's a good one.
Excuse me, don't you realize the nature of your minds when you're free of thoughts and impressions and no ego? You just see everything as it is, no thoughts.
Beyond conceptuality,
So how
like a Buddha
can
mind.
you then send thoughts? I'm sorry.
No, but I never experienced that
Okay.
until
Yeah.
recently.
There yet.
And maybe I
Pure
haven't
mind.
actually, but I've had glimpses. Now I understand that. But for
Yeah.
49 years, I had no awareness of that state of mind at all. It's constantly afflicted.
Sure. As we still are.
Okay. So back down into the weeds here. Why is it so hard to get rid of the afflictions? So we run into the brick wall of self-cherishing, right? That's a biggie. He bullied me. He hit me, right? So that's the barrier that we hide behind is me. Okay, so that's why it's going to be so hard to get rid of anger, because of me, myself, and I. The second one is the habit of, and I think this gets to your point, Eric, it's that habit of blowing things out of proportion, of exaggerating things. This is, I think, the technical term here is distorted attention, right? We're plastering on all these, labels and adjectives and adverbs. We're making a small problem into a huge federal case, and then telling everybody about it. Right? Exaggerations. That's that superimposition of conceptuality, making things much worse than it has to be, and then not letting go. Right, so we're in that riled up state of mind, and then we can't let go. It's like you had an argument with your boss at work, and you're stewing about it. You're thinking about it every day. Oh my God, he said this and I said that, and blah blah blah. And then you see the guy in the office, right? And you realize he's totally forgotten about the incident. It means nothing to him. He went home to his family and had a perfectly, nice time. And you're the one who's been carrying around all this poison, right? So not letting go, blowing things up. And then going back to this idea, of an unhappy mind, maybe like, for example, a frustrated state of mind. And there's so many reasons why we're frustrated. And one of them might be we can't solve other people's problems, right? That's a biggie. It should be so easy. Why can't you just listen to me and take my advice, and we wouldn't have this problem, right?
Even though
That's
I can't,
frustrating.
but I don't take my advice.
And so along with that is, it's hard to overcome these afflictions because we don't accept our limitations as to what we can change, right? And so we're always trying to just push, 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 pull, 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 right? Whereas, if we could just accept a situation and not try to tweak it, there would be a lot less frustration, a lot less anger, a lot less belligerence. Not being in the habit of watching our minds, right? Of gauging our emotional states, right? Not stopping the anger when it's not anger, but when it's still that mental unhappiness, right? And then not understanding karma, not believing in cause and effect, not realizing that the experiences that we're in now are the result of karma, even at the mundane level, okay? So it's obvious that acting in an unethical way, if we're harming others, eventually it's going to catch up with us, right? We might think that we can get away with lying, cheating, and stealing and the like, but even if no one's watching us, that karma is still accumulating, right? And we will eventually reap the consequences. And so we need to be very aware of our role in creating any situation that upsets us. And so there's a quote from Shantideva, this is chapter 6, verse 25. This is sort of related. I'm actually not sure how this relates. Everything that we experience is a result of a complex of causes and conditions that come together. So being sensitive to that complexity, verse 25 reads, all defilements of whatever kind, this is mental pollution, all defilements of whatever kind, and the whole variety of evil deeds that we might engage in are brought about by circumstances. None is independent, none autonomous. So we have a role in any given situation. And if it's a particularly, challenging situation that would cause us to get angry, well, that's the result of things that we did in the past. Okay, that's the point there. It may not be, something that's easy to understand, like a connect the dots situation, but rather it's a complex coming together of many, many different circumstances and conditions over, this lifetime, or if you want to think of previous lifetimes, great. But that's very helpful in understanding our role in contributing to a situation. Okay. And then finally, it's not really understanding the disadvantages of the afflictive emotions, which is the point that Eric was making, right? What's wrong with expressing our anger? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with chasing our desires? The whole economy, I mean, everything we know, it says this is a capitalist economy. Go for it, go for it, go for it, right? Buying stuff is good for the economy. And yet the bottom line is that by not recognizing that by harming others in doing those things and chasing our desires and expressing our anger, we actually harm ourselves, right? We undermine our own peace, our own happiness with the guilt and the regret that we may experience afterwards, right? We're going to lose our friends, we're going to lose our wealth, all the good things that we think of as happiness will go out the window. But since we don't understand that that's one of the main disadvantages of the afflictive emotions, then we continue to give way to them. So emotions are dangerous when divorced from reason, right? Negative emotions such as anger, and this gets back to what we were talking about with social justice and anger, right? We can manipulate people by igniting, emotional reactions like anger, through fear, through insults, through divisiveness, right? We're very much right now steeped in a culture of violence, right? We see that all around us, unfortunately. And so when we think then of, ethical conduct at the level of the social order, at the level of society, what does that mean? Ethical conduct being, a way of the opposite of giving into this culture of violence. So I found on this, actually, I was looking into this. There's a interesting website. Oh, I lost my link. Anyway, the idea of human rights. Okay, so here's a little quote here. What is hate speech? That's what I was trying to figure out. What exactly is hate speech? Upholding free speech is hugely important to open societies that respect human rights. Human rights treaties outlaw offensive speech when it possesses a risk or threat to others. Speech that is simply offensive but poses no risk to others is generally not considered a human rights violation. Okay, so here the bottom line is hate speech. Hate speech becomes a human rights violation if it incites discrimination, hostility, or violence towards a person or a group defined by their race, religion, ethnicity, or other factors.
Doesn't seem like we're holding to our own laws about hate speech then.
Right? So that's at the community level. And then how does that, trickle down to at the individual level? One of the skills that I think, we're lacking now is the life skill of civil discourse, right? Being able to engage in these difficult topics respectfully, right? Like a lot of times people now, they don't even want to talk about these issues because because we don't have the skill. I know I don't personally, before you know, I'm just yelling. So believe it or not, there's a website, uscourts.gov, under educational resources. Their guidelines, I think this was, for students primarily, for setting ground rules for civil discourse and difficult conversations. So I'm just going to read the top three, but I think it was fascinating. These are really, really good, boots on the ground tips on how to engage in these difficult conversations. The first is, and there's common sense, be mindful of your own behavior. Notice how you internally are reacting when others speak, right? Pay attention to how your words and your silence are impacting the experience for others in the group. What are you doing to create a welcoming environment for differing opinions? Are you looking at the speaker and giving your full attention? Are you listening with an open mind? And this is the punchline, momentarily putting aside what you will say next, right? I love that one. And are you asking clarifying questions? Are you being careful not to take over the conversation by talking longer? Like you just keep going, yeah, and the other guy's like, are you refraining from subtle but disrespectful behavior or not paying attention when others speak? Okay, and then it keeps going, like a bunch of different other points there. So, so ethical conduct, we're kind of going full circle here. Ethical conduct then relies on skills such as civil discourse, such as refraining from hate speech, just talking about actions of body, speech, and mind, right? And skills such as these in order to bring people together, to create, harmony, to create a unified society that's based on individuals who are experiencing peace, right? Okay. So, so we've talked about the disadvantages of anger and the benefits of patience. And so what are some more boots on the ground anger? Now we're talking about anger management skills. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 ideas here. What are your ideas? Anger management skills. So you're going to leave this class in the next 10 minutes. You're going to be out there in the wild, going home, going down that road. What's on your top 10 list of things that you do to keep it together here?
Could I volunteer an idea? Can you hear me?
You're on your bicycle going down the road.
Easy.
Speak, please.
Oh, are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you guys could hear me. It's really interesting because when you get into these things like anger workshops for drug addicts and things like that, you'll hear these tricks that they are taught. And if it'll work for them, maybe it could work for me. So I've often tried this. I am speaking from personally being very angry. I have learned to use anger in sports. I've been coached in sports to use anger to perform better. I have been around people who use anger a lot successfully, and I've witnessed anger as a tool that's really successful in my mind. When you look at it, it really is not very successful. I think the Dalai Lama once was quoted saying, yeah, anger does bring about strength, but it's very dangerous because it's unpredictable what you will do with that strength. And so I think for me, when I see anger arising, and this is just a straight anger workshop idea because I was involved in anger workshops as a well, anyway, is that when you see the anger arising, just observe yourself as if you're watching yourself as an actor in a play, because otherwise you get caught up in what is called the amygdala response. And the amygdala response is faster than the frontal cortex. So all this talk about thinking about the benefits of, compassion or the benefits of not having anger doesn't work because the amygdala is much quicker.
Right.
And so the example they'll give in the anger workshops, and I'm not a psychologist. I was just there to guide meditations, but the psychologists were describing this. And the way it works is that anger occurs when you believe a boundary has been crossed and it's unacceptable. And so it is a part of the survival mechanism, if you believe in Darwinism, and that we've learned to use anger as a fight or flight response. And sometimes we use it to develop the fight response as opposed to the flight response, which might end up in our death. If you run away from a grizzly bear, you die. If you challenge it, it may back down. So this is something we believe will really work. The anger workshop person will say, look, when you see the anger arising, you don't have time
to reason through it. Yeah.
All of the things we've talked about today, you don't have time for any of those things because they happen so quickly. So I think one person today mentioned that if you have the response of not acting on if you have the ability through habituation to not act immediately on the amygdala response, then you stand a chance because then your frontal cortex can catch up. So one of the things they'll teach, and I've used this, and this is fantastic, is view yourself as if you're watching yourself as an actor in a play and you're taking on a role. Once the anger arises, you think, oh, I'm an actor. I'm taking on this role. I'm using anger like a Viking berserker warrior. A berserker warrior is how we get the word berserk. They use drugs and anger to be very ferocious in battle, and it worked, right? So if we view ourselves as anger arises as a ferocious berserker, then we can get that moment we need, that split second we need to let the
distance
catch up to the reaction. The reaction, which is the amygdala reaction, has already pumped our blood with hormones such as testosterone and adrenaline, things which make us stronger, smarter, more capable. But it's not like the Dalai Lama said, it's uncontrollable. If we can grab that split second after the arrival of the anger, then we stand a chance. And that I'll leave it at that.
That's really good. Yeah. I think just two little points. So counter conditioning and being able to reprogram or retrain the mind using the techniques that we've been talking about, in terms of really meditating on the disadvantages of anger and the benefits of patience. Like you said, that's something that we have to do off the cushion. On the cushion as well as off the cushion when our minds are in a state of, peace and equilibrium. And only then through, concerted effort will we be able to then call on that in an actual, situation that would normally provoke anger. Also, and so I'm not saying, I'm not undermining what you said, Richard, by any means. I'm just saying that the two go hand in hand, right? And then in terms of the anger being or seeming to give results, then again, we have to think about results in terms of time frame, right? Using the perspective of time. So in the immediate short term, it may seem like, the person who's bigger, louder, stronger, and, punches harder is the one who wins the battle. But, when you think of that long-term consequences, right, in terms of, years, decades, et cetera, then the karmic consequences will of an angry, purely negative act will eventually arise. And I really like the idea about the third person because I was thinking about that. That was one of my 7 points. So there's this idea of referring to oneself in the third person instead of the first person, just like you were saying, thinking of yourself as an actor And so it's called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Iliism, Iliism, something like that. And so what I was thinking is you could think of yourself as like, I could say, the person who is called Losang is experiencing a mental state called jealousy, right? So by thinking of myself in the third person or as an actor, that doesn't take too long. If you've been practicing that habit, over and over again, right, as you go about in your daily life, right, the person named Lee is sitting in the room, right?
I use this one.
Okay, or this one
is experiencing this.
Okay, not even naming it.
Yeah, not even naming. I mean, I guess that's also part of it, just because like I try in practice, I'm trying to avoid I, because we
Yeah.
jump to I so often, and I'm like,
Okay.
why is this in all these things they teach us to say when we're trying to like, disuse I, or like use
Yeah.
it just a label? So I'm like, this one is doing this, and I don't know, it's starting to sink in.
Yeah. When I was working in Virginia many years ago, that we were doing interviews, and this young man came in for his interview, and he referred to himself in the third person. It was really interesting. He once said, "Yeah, I went to, Virginia Tech." He's like, Bob went to Virginia Tech. Bob graduated in 99.
I like it.
The whole interview, he was
So
in the
you
third
hired-
person. Huh?
You hired him. Were you hired?
Did we? I don't think so.
No, I don't think you hired that guy.
Think we did. He was just,
Well, Bob did it.
Let's
screw up the order. Screw up the order. It's the red flag, if you ask me.
It's okay to be conventional sometimes.
Okay.
a little unsettling.
At least he wasn't there.
I'm sure he went home and said, well, Bob didn't get that. I'll get the
Maybe I
next.
should have gone into the interview with me.
Oh my God. Okay. So yeah, so naming the feeling, right? That's part of it, right? Uh-oh, here I'm mentally unhappy. Oh, going down that, slippery slope, right? That gives you control, because you've called it what it is, right? You're in the third person. Count to 10, right? Everybody says count to 10, and there's some truth to that, right? Breathing changes your physiological state, right? You can always ask to take a break, right? I'm not quite comfortable with this conversation right now. Why don't we, reconvene tomorrow, something like that. And then in terms of speech, slow down, right? We have a tendency when we get irritated or frustrated, we speak faster, right? I certainly do. I just like motor mouth, right? Instead, we should consciously try to just slow down. And then remain silent.
Mm.
Silence is golden for a lot of reasons. Okay, so we're now out of time. It's 11:29.
Practice shamatha too. Like do shamatha meditation. It'll slow down every one of those. It'll help your response. Like, because your mind will be more still, and you'll be able to observe when it starts happening.
More sensitive.
Yeah, like to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Annie, I think you said you had 7, and I'm only counting 6 of what you did. So what am I missing? I think you said you had 7 ideas of what to do to control anger, but I just counted only 6 when you just read out those.
Really?
That list.
Name the feeling. Think of yourself in the third person. Count to 10. Breathe. Take a break or reschedule. Slow down and remain silent.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Was name the feeling the one you missed, Richard?
Maybe because I kind of didn't.
He cannot hear you.
The third person one, I didn't catch it the second time when you read it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Any last minute comments, questions?
Just a thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, to thank you also, but also to note, these are all great because what they enable us to do is instead of suppressing our anger, which would be a terrible thing. I think, you often hear, don't suppress your anger. You're teaching us how to deal with our anger without suppressing it, to really hold it and understand it. So thank you very much.
Right. Uproot it. Eradicate it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to read the beautiful after meditation from the Meditation, Mindfulness, and Kindness pamphlet. In gladness and in safety, may all living beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. May no one have anger or ill will, and let none wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart, may we cherish all living beings. May we radiate kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, we must sustain this recollection. May we and all others be able to live in pure conscience and moral conduct, train ourselves in the heroic mind of concerning others, and develop the accurate view of interdependency. And thus, may anyone who sees, hears, remembers, touches, or talks to us be free from all sufferings and abide in peace and happiness forever. Until the end of all sorrows in the world, may the beneficial instructions never be blown away by the wind of superstitions. May all genuine spiritual guides live long, and may the entire world be filled with people who seek for truth and find aspiration in authentic teachings. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you again, Anila.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Question, what you got?